that's about where we are. Okay. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker who has been to the Fred before and has entertained us immensely. He also has a project of his own having to do with 19th century baseball uniforms, both major and minor league. It's a fascinating study of what was actually being worn, not only in style, but in color. And he'll say a word about that, I'm sure. But he was one of our selectees for our, again, one of our top selectees, in fact, again, for his research presentation, Elegant and Oddball 19th Century Team Photos. So, Craig, take it away.
Thank you, Peter. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah, do you want to go to full screen and you should be ready?
It is full screen.
Oh, okay, okay.
Let's make sure it works. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Craig Brown. Some of you may know me from the research project called Threads of Our Game that Peter mentioned. This visual presentation tonight is one of the byproducts of that project. Tonight, we'll take a detailed look at the team photos of the 19th century. We're going to start by looking at the elegant, some of the more beautiful imagery of the period. We'll follow that by looking at the oddball, some of the slightly strange images that we've come across. And we'll close by examining images that have been recently discovered. And we'll ask the question, how many team photos have been lost over time? So let's start with the elegant. This is, of course, the 1869 Forest City team of Rockford, Illinois. It's a beautiful composition. I like especially the way the players are posed and the staggering of the different heights. I like the lighting on the faces, and I especially love the great uniforms. This is a photo of a team ready to play ball.
Your slide didn't advance.
Oh, well, sharing is paused. Bring your share window to the front. How do I do that? So you're not seeing it, Bob?
I'm seeing the title fancy, examining team photos of the 19th century, but when you're describing the team photo, it's not coming up.
It says sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to the front. I wonder how I do that. Let's see down here. Let me stop share. And let me share again. Let me just click on this. So can you
see if it advances?
Nope. Shoot. Okay, hold on. How do I get out of escape mode?
There you are.
Is it advancing?
There you are. You're there.
We're there?
Look elegant.
Okay. Sorry about that. So we're going to start by looking at the 1869 Forest City team. Can we all see that on screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the 1869 Forest City team of Rockford, Illinois. As I said, it's a beautiful composition. I like the way the players are posed and the staggering of the different heights of the players. I like the lighting on the faces and especially the great uniforms. This is a team ready to play baseball. Al Spalding, third from right, holds the baseball in his hand to signify that he's the pitcher. There are 9 players in this photo, and the team is composed in a single row composition. And the photo was taken by George W. Barnes of Rockford. Many things in baseball are borrowed from cricket. The single row composition of the Forest City team is very similar to this image. This is the All England Cricket Club, published in Harper's Weekly in October 1859, 10 years before the Forest City photo. And if I toggle back and forth between the two, you can see the similarities. George W. Barnes was the photographer of our Forest City photo, as I mentioned. At left is an example of Barnes' stamp on the back of a cabinet, one of his cabinet cards. His gallery and studio was at 106 South Main Street in Rockford, indicated by the red arrow in the street scene. And at right is an ad from the 1869 Rockford City Directory, where Barnes is advertising selling photographs from cards up to life size, taken on short notice. And so here's a visualization of the day the team was photographed. The first floor of the studio would have been the gallery where George Barnes displayed and sold his work. The second floor shown here would have been the photo studio, also called the laboratory. There was no electricity or powder flash, so everything was lit by natural light coming through skylights. The image would have been recorded as a negative image on glass using the wet plate process, where the photochemicals were applied to the glass plate minutes before the exposure was made. The glass plate was about 6.5 by 8.5 inches in size, and the exposure would have been made in about 15 seconds. So because of the long exposure times, stands were used to keep the subject still. The photo at the left here is an example of one of those stands, and the photo on the right is a detailed view of the Forest City photo where I've colored in magenta. You can see the stands behind the players standing in the photo. We all good, Bob?
Yes.
Okay. The final product sometimes had elaborate photo surrounds. This example included pictures of the team officers, secretaries, and scorer. You see in the bottom center is Hiram Waldo, the club manager. Of course, he was known for discovering Cap Anson. He's affectionately labeled on this surround as father. And over in the bottom left is Al Spalding, already one of the team's secretaries, and he's already cutting his teeth in the business of baseball. So how were these team photos reproduced and distributed? This is the 1865 Atlantic team of Brooklyn, a photo we know very well. This photo was taken on November 7th, 1865, after the team was declared champion. The photographer was Charles Williamson of Brooklyn. And on November 10th, 1865, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle reported on this photo, saying, quote, "The picture embraces the veteran Peter O'Brien in citizen's dress, surrounded by the new 9. The photographs will be finished in large groups and a carte de visite size so that all desiring may have their choice." The article also goes on to say that the 9 of 1864, the previous year, has been generally sought after, and it is expected that the same thing will occur with the 9 of 1865. That research came to me from Tom Schieber. So we now know that there was also a team photo from 1864. However, currently that photo is unknown. So here's the Atlantic team from 1868. This is a Peck and Snyder card, but probably very similar to an image that the team carried with them when they went on tour of Western New York. One contestant in Buffalo remembered that, quote, "The Atlantics brought with them a large number of photographs to sell to enthusiasts. Printed across the mount were the words, 'Champions of the world, never beaten and never will be beaten.'" Of course, this is another photo we know very well. This is the 1874 Boston team. This image was most likely taken to promote the team's upcoming tour of England. And it's another example of a beautiful composition, but much more formal than the Forest City photo that we looked at previously. Players here were instructed to look off camera. This was a way to give the subjects a more sophisticated and dignified feel. The photographer was James Wallace Black, who had his studio on Washington Street in Boston. Note that none of the players were smiling in this photograph, and this is for several reasons. One, it was harder for subjects to remain still while smiling. But more importantly, smiling was seen in the 19th century as a sign of madness, lewdness, or drunkenness. But most importantly, both baseball and photography were trying to become serious endeavors, and both the players and the photographer wanted to convey this. There were 11 men in this photo, and this is an example of a multiple row composition, a row of players standing, a row of players sitting, and a row of players on the ground. Note that the bat's in the foreground. This is one of the more enduring traditions of baseball photography. Often photos were seen by the public as published engravings or woodcuts. This engraving was published in Harper's Weekly in June of 1874. Note the position of the bats. This tells us that multiple images were produced in this photo session. Actually, this is an engraving of the photo that you held up earlier, Peter. Well, you can look at the bats here, they're in the center, and here the bats are over to the right. Here, George Wright's hat is on the ground. Here, George Wright is holding his hat. So let's take a closer look at this photo. Spalding again holds a baseball to signify that he's the pitcher, but also note that he's rolled up his sleeve on his pitching arm. This is to mimic how he would have appeared on the field. Let's take a closer look at George Wright. Note the hand-cut letters on his bib, but also note his right hand and the swollen joints on his ring and pinky fingers. This was very typical of the day. It was common to see swollen and sometimes mangled fingers in these photos. Team photos were also taken outside. This is a well-known photo of Athletic on the left and Boston on the right, taken at the first South End grounds in Boston in the summer of 1875. The image offers a view of the ballpark and the patrons, and also the condition of the field. Note that there were 5 baseballs shown in this photograph, 3 on the ground, 1 held by Dick McBride, and 1 held by Cal McVeigh. So I wonder if this was the total number of baseballs available for this game. This detailed view shows the informal and casual pose of the players. This is, of course, O'Rourke, Barnes, and Schaefer. A detailed view of the photo we just saw. And here's another detailed view showing the crowd behind the players. One crank seems to wear a hat entirely too big for his head. This guy here seems to have a very poor-fitting hat. Another fan has turned to look in the opposite direction. It has been 150 years since this photo was taken, and this fellow has yet to turn back around. You can see the blurry images of moving people behind the head of Ezra Sutton, indicating the long exposure time. I'm including in this discussion of team photos what I call the portrait montage. This is a montage of the 1877 St. Paul team. They were a League Alliance team. And typically a team photo was also taken on the same day as these portraits were made, though often not included in the montage. Portrait montages were commonly produced as cabinet cards. Here are 2 from the year of 1877. The Lowell, Massachusetts team on the left and the Auburn, New York team on the right. Both were League Alliance teams. I like the fact that someone wrote the Invincibles as a nickname on the Lowell card. And the Auburn card featured early portraits of Tom Burns, Fred Dunlap, and Jimmy Macular. There are a large number of photos from this period of 1876 to 1878, and this tells us one thing, that selling team photos was as much a part of the baseball business model as was building an enclosed field or hiring out-of-town players. Let's jump to the 1880s. Another well-known photo of a well-known team. This, of course, is the 1885 Chicago team with Anson, Kelly, and Clarkson. I've also in the slide shown an ad from the Sporting Life promoting this photo. The ad was run on October 7th, 1885, stating that elegant and lifelike photographs were available from who else but Spalding. A cabinet size was 25 cents, and 18 by 12 was $1.50. 25 cents then equals about $7 today, and 25 cents was generally the price of admission to a ball game, or 50 cents. This photo was taken in June of 1885 by Charles Mosier of Chicago. And the Sporting Life on June 17, 1885 reported that, quote, a very handsome group photograph of the 12 players of the Chicago club has been taken. But if you look at the photo, you realize that there are 11 men in this photo, not 12. And then you also realize that the player standing between Anson and Kelly, pitcher Jim McCormick, has shadows on his face that don't match the other players. So here's McCormick. You can see the shadows are on the right side of his face, where everyone else has shadows on the left side of his face, or our left side. You can also see this sort of strange line in front of above Tom Burns' head. And that's because of this. Above is the original photo where Larry Corcoran, the pitcher, is standing at far left, and the catcher outfielder, Cy Sutcliffe, is standing between Anson and Kelly, where the red arrow is. Both Corcoran and Sutcliffe were released in mid-July of the year, and McCormick added. So this kind of photo retouching was common throughout the 19th century when players were signed and released during the season. Two examples of team photos that were promoting products. These date from 1885 to 1887, are both of the St. Louis Browns. As we've already noted, St. Louis owner Chris Bondera was one of the game's best promoters. So was Billy Barney. This photo is from Baltimore from 1885, and that's Billy Barney in the middle. Note that we're now up to 14 players in the photograph. The photo was by James Cummins of Baltimore. And the Sporting Life on April 22nd, 1885 gives us more info on how team photos were sold. The newspaper said, quote, "Manager Barney engaged the services of the best photographer of the city and had 2 views taken, one in uniform and one in civilian dress. They are on sale at 25 cents for the smaller size and $1 for the larger size at the office of the club, at the grounds, or by ordering by mail." In the 1880s, the wet plate process was replaced by the dry plate process. This meant that glass plates were now coated in a dry gelatin emulsion and could be purchased from the manufacturer with the chemicals already in place. This new technology also shortened exposure times, now less than a second for a snapshot. And this ad also showed the cumbersome wet plate process on the left and the very convenient dry plate process on the right, where now you can carry all of your negatives in a little briefcase and you get to smoke a cigar. Another great image of a team ready to play ball is this one. This is the 1889 St. Louis team with Comiskey as manager standing in the back. This photo was taken at the Jefferson Street grounds in Philadelphia. And this image also has some great faces of the fans in the background peeking into the photo. In fact, this detail view shows that the shortened exposure times now eliminated the blurry subjects. You remember before behind Ezra Sutton, the people were all blurry. Now these are very sharp people, although low res. Let's jump to the 1890s and the advent of halftone lithography. This new process meant that photographs could now be reproduced on the printed page, no longer as woodcuts, but now as halftone images. The Spalding Baseball Guide began printing halftone images in 1895. The photo at left is of the 1894 Philadelphia team. And this is the 1897 Boston team, photo we've all seen before. The photographer was Elmer Chickering of Boston. Now we're up to 16 men in the photo. And the Sporting Life on August 24th, 1897 said this, quote, "Groups of Boston players," groups meaning photos, "groups of Boston players, large and small, are on sale at the grounds for the benefit of the members. Note that the player standing in center back, Charlie Ganzel, is not 7 feet tall. He's actually 6 feet in height, but he is standing on a riser. So is Bob Allen standing next to him. Ganzel is the same height as Jack Stivetts, 6 foot. Now let's take a look at some of the oddball photos, which, like the Oscars or the Emmys, I'm going to hand out awards for these. So I'm calling these the Audi Awards. So the Audi Award for the best obscene gesture in a team photo would go to, drum roll, of course, this photo. This is a photo of Boston and New York taken on the opening day of the original, taken on opening day at the original Polo Grounds in April 29th, 1886. This photo is probably most notable for what Boston is wearing. This is the first ever designated road uniform. But as we all know, this photo also includes Charles Radbourne flipping us the bird from the top left. There's old Hoss. And here's a better look at Radbourne's gesture, forever frozen in time. And it seems that Radbourne was ready to do the same in some other team photos. From left is a Boston photo from 1887 and right from 1890. Of course, we know that Radbourne also gave us the finger in his 1888 Old Judge baseball card. So the Audi Award for the best prop in a team photo, well, that has to go to the 1867 Haymaker team, who of course were photographed holding pitchforks. The Audi Award for the best mustaches in a team photo, that has to go to the 1892 Elmira, New York team of the Eastern League. This is one of the lost and found images that we'll talk about shortly. But if you look at some of the mustaches in the background, there's some real doozies. And these 3 guys in the middle, they look more like sea captains than baseball men. The Audi Award for the most unusual pose in a team photograph, well, that has to go to the 1887 Pittsburgh team, These guys look like they're ready for a street fight. The audio awards for the best photobomb. Of course, a photobomb is when someone jumps into the photograph. Well, that award would have to go to the 1894 Baltimore team, who were photographed in New York for the season opener on April 28, 1894. Traveling with the team to New York was an entourage of Baltimore fans, some of whom decided to join the photo. One print of this image identifies these gentlemen, and I've looked up their occupations. And they are, from left, this guy here is a plumber and a tin shop owner, newspaper reporter, salesman, doctor. Of course, this is Ned Hanlon, the manager. This is Harry Vonderhorst, the owner. This is Herman Vonderhorst, his brother and the secretary. Another newspaper guy, a cigar merchant, a hotel keeper, a pharmacist. This is Tom Murphy, the Baltimore groundskeeper, who obviously was coming to check on the New York field. And then the last guy, I could not figure out who he was. All I know is that his name was A. Thomas. I could not locate who he was in the directories. The audio award for the best celebrity photobomb goes to the Chicago Cubs, the Chicago team of 1888, who posed with some famous members of the New York theater scene. In the center were actors Digby Bell and DeWolf Hopper, both avid fans of the New York Giants. Hopper at Wright was so disgusted with a recent swoon by New York that he and his friends posed with the arch enemy Chicago team after an invitation from Cap Anson, who was also a theater goer. This photo was most likely made in June 1888 when Chicago was in the New York area. And it was in August of 1888 that Hopper first recited Casey at the Bat, the first of approximately 10,000 recitations in his lifetime. The audio award for the second worst Photoshop job goes to the 1895 Pittsburgh team. Note that Monty Cross has been superimposed next to Connie Mack in the center of this photograph. Baseball Reference lists Mack as 6'1" in height and lists Cross as 5'8" in height. But based on this, it looks like Cross is about 7'3" and weighs 350 pounds. Monty Cross was a favorite of Connie Mack because, like Mack, he was a non-drinker. Cross, of course, later joined Mack on the Philadelphia A's team of the 1900s. And it's possible that Mack left an open space when this photo was taken, knowing that Cross wasn't going to be there and then he could be added later, unfortunately rather poorly by the photographer. Oop. All right, the audio award for the worst Photoshop job. That was the second worst. The worst Photoshop job, that goes to our Canadian friends. This is the 1898 Hamilton Club of the Canadian League. I'll just have you scan the back row of this photograph. And it's very clear that this guy, fourth from left, Canadian Hall of Famer Bill Phillips, is not scaled at the right size. Not even close, actually. So I've shown you a bunch of photos that you've all seen before. Now I hope to show you some images that you've never seen before, possibly, some of you. This is the 1876 Star team of Syracuse. When I put this into the presentation last year, this photo had only recently been discovered. Researcher Justin McKinney, who I think is on the call possibly, had located a reprint of this photo in a Syracuse newspaper in 1937. Up to then, this was an unknown image. Another researcher Carson Laurie, then reached out to the Onondaga Historical Society in Syracuse to see if by chance the original was in their possession. It was, and he obtained this digital scan. However, since then, in the last year, a Syracuse paper did an online article about Syracuse baseball history, which included this image. So now this image, which a year ago was unknown, can now be found circulating the world on Google Images. Here's another fairly unknown image. This is the 1879 Springfield team of the National Association. This just came up recently for auction. And that's Lipman Pike sitting second from left. This is the 1879 national team from Washington, also of the National Association. This photo was recently discovered, but also interesting because many of the ends on the uniforms are backwards. So this N is backwards, this N is backwards, this N is backwards, this N is backwards. Still befuddles me as to why that is. Here's a photo you may not have seen. This is the national team again, but this is from 1883 when they were an independent or semi-pro team. Researcher Carson Laurie also discovered this photo, and he told me that this photo was, quote, mislabeled and collecting dust in a forgotten folder at the Washington Historical Society. A portion of this team formed the city's entry into the Union Association the following season of 1884. Great photograph, by the way. This is the 1889 Worcester Team of the Atlantic Association. 20-year-old Jesse Burkett sitting third from left. There's Jesse. And this may be the only photo that we have of the Grove Street grounds, which existed from 1888 to 1891 in Worcester. This is a beautiful photograph of the 1892 Cleveland team, one of the best teams of the 1890s. And this only recently has become known to the baseball public and has many notable players. The front row is Davis, McAleer, Cy Young, Zimmer, and Clarkson. The back row is Cuppy, O'Connor, Childs, Tebow, Burkett, McKean. And at far right is Jake Virtue, who's probably the least known of all these players. But this photo was owned by Jake Virtue. And recently, Virtue's descendants sold this and many other of his baseball possessions at auction. So this is an example how of a hidden gem may still be hiding somewhere in a private collection. This is the 1898 Sioux City team of the Western League, another image that was unknown a few years ago, but now has been circulated quite a bit. I know John put this on his blog last November. This is the team that Charlie Comiskey would buy and move to St. Paul in 1895. And if you look at this detail view, I asked the question, do these gentlemen look happy to be playing in Sioux City? I would say no. Here's the photo that probably no one has seen. This is the 1895 St. Paul team. Now after moving from Sioux City, they're now in St. Paul, still in the Western League. That's Comiskey in the middle. And this is a recently discovered photo, I'm sure one that most of you haven't seen. This photo, I know Kerry Smith is on this call. I noticed this was in his backdrop behind his Zoom screen. This is a photo of this is an example of a photo that exists only in microfilm, I believe. This is the 1897 St. Paul team, published in the St. Paul Globe, April 30th, 1897. Comiskey again is in the middle. And I believe that's Comiskey's son, John Lewis, in the foreground as the mascot, who would follow his father as the White Sox owner from 1931 to 1939. 1897 is really the first when we see halftone images appearing on newsprint and in newspapers. And though this original image may be lost, this published reprint is all we have. Here's another lost image. This is the 1899 Buffalo team of the Western League after they moved from the Eastern League. This was published in the Buffalo Sunday Morning News in April of 1899. Again, another photo that we probably don't have the original of anymore. Note in the far right here, we got a very forlorn Billy Nash. Often newspapers in the 20th century have published pictures of 19th century teams. So this is a great resource for all researchers that you should not overlook. Don't just stop at 1900, keep going. This is the 1885 Atlanta team of the Southern League, published in the Atlanta Constitution in April of 1906. This is the infamous 1877 Louisville team, published in the Louisville newspaper in July of 1910. Not much, but it's all we have. Here's the 1877 cricket team of Binghamton, New York, published in the Endicott newspaper in April of 1918. Note the beautiful bibs and the slanted angled lettering. Here's the 1892 Washington team of the National League. This was published in the Washington Sunday Star on October 5th, 1924, just as the Senators were to enter the 1924 World Series. Again, the original photo was lost. And here's what I teased the other day. This is a very recent discovery in a photo I'm sure few have seen before. This is the 1883 Detroit team, published in the Kansas City Star of all places in July of 1927. Of course, that's Jack Chapman in the middle, and to our left of Chapman is Ned Hanlon, and standing at the far right is Charlie Bennett. Sometimes all we have is a rendering of a team photo. This is the 1890 New York Players League team, clearly drawn from a photo, but all we have is the rendering. Another example is this photo. This is a drawing. This is the 1894 Detroit team of the Western League, published in the Detroit Free Press in April of 1894. Again, clearly drawn from a photo, but the photo is apparently lost. And I want to show this clipping from the Philadelphia Times for April 9th, 1882. This is a typical example of a report of an image that's now lost. It reads, F. Gutenkunst has been engaged to take a photographic view of the athletic baseball grounds, the 9, and the spectators during the game with the Yale College Club. Of course, a photo of the athletic team in the first year of the American Association would be a true baseball treasure if one still existed today. So I asked the question, how many team photos are lost and why do only some survive? Well, some photos survive because of personal collections, as we've noted. This one is a montage belonging of the photos of Deacon McGuire, published in the 20th century. And some photos exist because who was in the photos? This is the 1896 Patterson team of the Atlantic League. Does this photo solely exist because Honus Wagner and Ed Barrow are included in this image? I would think the answer is yes. All right, I have one more slide and then a bar chart to show you. And I want to show you this image because this is the well-known example from the New York Public Library, a well-known photo from the New York Public Library. It's a photo of the 1884 National League team. The photo was taken at Recreation Park. I also want to point out, note the gong back here on the post behind no plate. This was always used to signify the start of the game. The photographer was Thomas Sweeney of Cleveland, who traveled with the Cleveland team to Philadelphia when they played there on May 14th, 1884. The Sporting Life on May 21st reported that, quote, the Philadelphia club was twice photographed previous to Wednesday's game. That's the May 14th game. The first group included all 17 men now under engagement and on the roster, and the second was composed of the Wednesday 9. So this photo is of the starting lineup that day, but the team photo mentioned is unknown or lost. But I wanted to point this out because the article then goes on to say this, quote, the opinion was universal on the ground that the photographer was a Jonah and that the club would be defeated, and sure enough they were. Cleveland beat Philadelphia 7-5 on this game, on this day. I add this because superstition was a major factor to why some photos do not exist, and possibly this is why some photos were never taken. Players in the 19th century, much like today, often thought that are very superstitious and often thought that having their pictures taken would bring them bad luck. And while we have this one photo, we do not have the photo of the entire Philadelphia team that was mentioned in the article, nor do we have any photos of the Cleveland team from 1884. So this is the last frame. And this is an analysis of the National League from 1876 to 1900, trying to answer the question, so how many team photos exist today? The green squares indicate where a team photo was known, when a team photo was known. The blue squares indicate when a portrait montage is known. So if you look at the bottom here, this is 1876 running to 1900. In 1876, we had 8 teams in the NL, so we got 8 squares. In 1877, it went down to 6 teams, so we have 6 squares. And over in the 1890s, we have 12 teams, so we had 12 squares. So in 1876, we had 3 teams that we have a known team photo. We have 2 teams that we have a known portrait montage, and we have 3 teams where we have no photo. So if you add this all up, this comes out to 64% of the possible team photos are currently known. So 64% are known, which means 36% are unknown. Of the 64% that are known, 51 of these team photos, 51% of these are team photos, 13% are portrait montages. And of the 36 that are unknown, I would make an educated guess that about half of this number, maybe about 18%, are photos that are missing, are yet to be discovered, or are lost in the sands of time. Thank you.
That's incredible. Gary, that was what can I say, Craig? That was a great job.
Well, thank you.
That was,
Do you like my little Audi award guy? With the,
I love
the mustache and the stripes on his hat?
I love that. That says it all. I have a question myself I wanted to ask. I made a note of this. You showed that photograph of the 1865 Atlantics in Brooklyn. Right. And you actually knew the date the photograph was taken.
Yes.
You gave a date, and I think, so how did you know that? How were you able to discern that that photo was taken on a certain date?
That's a good question. It may have been, I know the newspaper article was November 10th, and it may have mentioned that it was photographed, that the team was photographed 3 days earlier. You know, usually those reports say a team was photographed on the previous Wednesday or something like that. Or I might have gotten that information from some of the contributors to Threads. I'd have to go back and check my notes on that.
Right.
You know, usually, you know, folks like Tom Sheever and John Thorne send me things, and usually that comes from one of those guys.
Okay, so sometimes supporting newspaper articles
Yes.
is something will point
Exactly.
you in that direction.
Yeah, I wouldn't give a date if it wasn't given somewhere in a factual way. So either an educated guess based on a report or an actual documentation saying when the photograph was made.
Gary Passamonte pointed out that in that image of the red stockings of 1874, which happens to also be the cover of
That's right.
of our guide here, that one of the players, Harry Schaefer, is wearing his 1871 Boston Red Sox pin.
Mm.
So in the photo, so just kind of an interesting point. Justin also noted that there's only one known photograph of a Union Association team. Do you know of that, or
Which union?
Boston.
the Union Association, the UA of
Oh.
1884?
That there's only one photo of a Union Association team?
The
That's what
Boston team.
What, Bob?
Boston.
Oh, yes, there is a photo known of that. Yes, there is a photo of that Boston team. Yes.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's on Threads. If you go to 1884 Boston, you'll see it. But it's a fairly known photo. It's been circulated quite a bit. It's where they're wearing blue.
Somebody else asked that 1886 photograph of Boston and New York. I think Mutri's in that photograph, and this, you know, it's the two teams in combination.
Yeah.
Do you know what somebody asked if that's what that photograph cost at that time? Could you have purchased that photograph?
I don't know. I've seen engravings of that photograph in the newspaper, but I don't know if I've ever seen a cabinet card or any kind of a reprint of that. Some of the other guys on this call will probably be able to answer that better than I can.
Likely a photograph, maybe more for a newspaper or a newspaper engraving.
It was basically made to commemorate the opening day, and you know, that was before halftones could be printed in newspapers. So I have seen a woodcut of that photograph.
Right. Okay. And I think that was all of our questions and comments, but that was truly an excellent presentation. Enjoyed it. Wait a minute, I have another one coming through. Hold on a moment. Somebody is saying as a Canadian.
Yes, your award will be in the mail.
Oh, the audio. Okay, the audio award. Okay. Well, you better get that shipped out right away. Well, thank you again for helping us kick this off tonight with our first segment of the 12th annual Fred. Not so annual. We had to skip a year. All right, Bob, I'd like just to add a few things about tomorrow.